Good afternoon. I'm Jack Rayner. I am one of your stage captains for the day here at First Baptist in the Decatur Book Festival. Let me make a couple of announcements and do a bit of an introduction before the program begins. Our authors are going to be signing books. After the presentation, what you are going to be asked to do is to go back out the doors that you came in. The signing table is directly to the left, and you will have an opportunity to meet the authors then. Books are available for purchase. Eagle Eye Bookstore wants you to buy their books. We want you to buy their books, and so they're right out the front door. Decatur Book Festival is a nonprofit. It depends on sponsors and donations to bring great authors to Decatur every year. Please consider, if you will, making a tax-deductible donation to support the festival. Go to the festival website, decaturbookfestival.com, and leave them your estate. So, if you will, turn your cell phones off, make sure that everything is silenced, and let me introduce our speakers. Quinn Eastman is your moderator, and then we are very fortunate to have Thomas Mullen, Wanda Morris, Brian Panowich, who are going to talk with us today about thrillers. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad that so many of you are here. I have sort of a brief description of each of the books, and then we'll get into some questions for our authors. So the first is The Rumor Game, a determined, by Thomas Mullen here, a determined reporter and an FBI agent face off against fascist flunkies in this historical thriller set in World War II era Boston. Reporter Anne Lemire, writes The Rumor Clinic, a newspaper column that disproves harmful rumors floating around town, some spread by Axis spies and others gossip mixed with fear and ignorance. Tired of chasing silly stories, Anne wants to write about something bigger. And then Special Agent Devin Mulvey, one of the few Catholics in the FBI, spends his weekdays preventing industrial sabotage and his evenings wooing lonely women whose husbands are off at war. When Anne's story about Nazi propaganda intersects with Devin's investigation into the death of a factory worker, the two are led down a dangerous trail of espionage, organized crime, and domestic fascism, one that implicates their own tangled pasts and threatens to engulf the city in violence. So Thomas Mullen, a resident of Decatur, has written several novels, and one of them is Darktown, which was the first in a series on the segregated Atlanta police force in the 1950s, and got a lot of praise for that. So second is What You Leave Behind by Wanda Morris. Dina Wood's life has fallen apart in the aftermath of losing her beloved mother, her marriage, and her prestigious job at an Atlanta law firm. She needs a fresh start. So Dina returns to her childhood home in Brunswick, Georgia, but her return is anything but the respite she thought it might be. One day she finds herself on the oceanfront property of a loner and widower who is fighting to keep land that has been in his family since the end of the Civil War. He threatens her and warns her to never return. But shortly after that, the man disappears and his valuable property is put up for sale. Curious about what happened, Dina digs into his disappearance and finds a family legacy at risk. What starts out as curious snooping turns into a deadly game of illegal land grabs and property redevelopment in poor and rural communities with dark and powerful forces at work. Wanda Morris is a former corporate lawyer, and that experience informs her most recent work. She's the author of 2 previous novels, All Her Little Secrets and Anywhere You Run, both highly acclaimed. and Nothing But the Bones by Brian Panowich. In McFalls County in North Georgia, a fictitious county name, local crime boss Gareth Burroughs runs everything up on the mountain. His enforcer, Nelson Nails McKenna, has worked for Burroughs since he was a teenager, although inside, Nails is not as much of a thug as he looks like. One night in a local roadhouse, Nails goes too far defending a woman. Leaving a dead body and several witnesses, Nails and the woman become fugitives and unlikely partners. The crime boss Burroughs sends Nails towards a possible escape route in Jacksonville, but there's more than one interested party on the pair's trail, including Burroughs' rebel do-gooder son, Clayton. In the end, Nails must make one final stand for both his freedom and on behalf of his friend, who also has quite a backstory. Brian is a former touring musician and firefighter, and he doesn't live in North Georgia, but actually near Augusta, right?
That's correct.
Where I think they just got power a couple days ago, right? So.
That's correct.
Okay. In your books, I was struck by the villains, and in that they take different forms. In each, like in Brian's book, it's maybe Gareth Burroughs. For Wanda's, it's more like there's this local politician, and then there's some other people behind him, and sometimes you don't even know who's the villain is until the end of the story. And I think the same is with yours, Tom. But when you are writing a villain, how do you get in their head and then write their dialogue so that it comes out kind of authentically or convincingly?
I'll go first since I'm sitting here. But first of all, thank you everybody for coming. It's a thrill that the book festival is back. This is so much fun. I've been to a lot of these. I've moderated, I've presented. I'm so psyched that this is happening again. So thank you all for coming. So yeah, it's funny. Here we are in a church talking about thrillers and crime and sin and evil. So I love that was the first question. I do think that's one of the things that makes crime fiction, mystery fiction a little different than other types of books is that, we get into it with evil and with, all the sin and vice that people do. Like, even if it's a mystery and there's maybe a murder in the beginning and you don't know who's done it, but you're wondering if all these different characters could have done it. And so the author, we get to show you the dark sides of every character so that you think every character might have done it. So it can kind of give you a dark and twisted worldview sometimes when you're writing crime fiction, but that's kind of partly the fun, and I hope as a reader that's partly the fun. I'm sure everybody in this room is a saint, and you all are wonderful, wonderful people, and none of you could ever be suspects in a crime story, but that is kind of the fun thing about it. Bad things happen in life. Open up the newspaper, watch TV. There are crimes being committed right now everywhere. And so you don't want to sensationalize it. You don't want to get crazy about it. I don't want you to root for the bad guys necessarily, but I do want them to feel like real three-dimensional people, because real three-dimensional people do bad things every day. And that's what we're trying to capture with the books.
Yeah, so I agree with Tom that, for me, when I'm writing the villains, I try to imagine that person, that villain, believes that he is the hero in his own story, right? And so he thinks that the thing that he is doing it either for the right reason or maybe it's the wrong reason, but it'll have a great result in the end. Because to Tom's point, everyone is not all bad, everyone is not all good, that we're all some shades of gray in between. And I like to create characters that actually have that. And in all the books that I've written, I'd like to think that, well, maybe with the exception of one character, all my villains have some redeeming quality. Like I said, with the exception of one I can remember from my first book. that guy was bad news all the way around. But otherwise, I think that, bad guys think that they're doing good things, or they're doing things that are for the good of either themselves or, some bad and twisted element.
I love going last because I can just say, well said, guys, and then talk about whatever I want. Let me do the...
Let me ask you, though.
I was just kidding, man. I wasn't going to talk.
I wanted to ask you, have you ever met somebody like either Gareth Burroughs or Nails McKenna?
Well, not that I can prove in a court of law that they or would want to even take that road with, but sure. I think that there's a couple of them sitting out here. I mean, and I mean that because there are no good guys in my books, and that's confusing, I guess, in a sense, because there are protagonists and antagonists, but they're all capable of both. Right? Mm-hmm. And I love when somebody says, oh yeah, that guy was terrible. Well, hold on. Let me tell you why, or give you some backstory, and maybe you'll change your mind. Like for me, everybody thought the main antagonist in my first novel was the bad guy. And for me, he was the hero. His story made more sense. He had more righteous indignation. And so for me, he was the hero. I think everybody's capable of doing both. And unless you have the full story, which we get to control and give you and dictate what we want you to think, which is pretty much why we do this, because we're all God-complex idiots. Yeah, but there's like I said, there are no good guys or bad guys in my books. There are just people trying to get by, doing the best that they possibly can do. And sometimes that means they gotta kill somebody,
The other thing I was struck by...
They put me in a church. I'm trying so hard, Thomas, not to get blown up.
The walls haven't fallen down yet, Brian, so we're good.
So maybe that leads me to something that, a question that I had is, to what degree does either religion or the supernatural play a part in your stories?
I'll go first. I think I always have some element of religion in my books, whether it is a character who has a deep faith or belief in God. In my most recent book, What You Leave Behind, that book actually does delve into the paranormal and what happens culturally around issues of paranormal. Now, you have to understand, for me, paranormal, ghost, all of that stuff is like untreaded territory, because I'm the biggest scaredy cat that there is. And so I think that adage, right into your fears, I took that on. But I think that, for me as a writer, because I personally have a deep faith, I think that comes through in my books in some form or fashion. And doesn't somebody, in the books, the kinds of books, at least the kinds of books I write, the bad things that happen to my characters, they need to believe in some higher power just to get through, I think.
I'll go next. So it's funny. Here, I was raised Catholic, and I know I'm sitting in a Baptist church. And there's not, yeah, it's all right. It's gone okay. But the new book that I wrote, a lot of my books have been set here in Georgia, but the new one was set in Boston during World War II. And they end up investigating the fact that some Catholic priests at that time were hoping the Nazis would win and were sometimes disseminating propaganda. There's even a scene in the book where an FBI agent is asking a priest some questions, and he knows that the priest is lying to him, and he even says to the priest, "I hope this building's lightning-proof, Father." And that does not go over well. The priest does not appreciate that joke. But so my books don't get super spiritual in that sense with religion, but religion as an organization is a really big deal in the new book, and partly it's about two characters who were raised with one church and have to deal with the fact that some of the people who run their church have been doing bad things, and they have to try to figure out what they're going to do about that. And it kind of messes with your moral compass when the people who are supposed to teach you right and wrong are not always doing the right thing.
For yours, Brian,
I'm probably
I'm
the
recalling that
opposite of Wanda.
some of your characters kind of reject religion, kind of.
Yeah,
But you do it fairly.
Well, that's a projection of me. I have a very deep-rooted cynicism toward organized religion.
You're going to bring these walls down.
And
It usually comes in through that
And I
vent,
think
the lightning.
that the fact that the antagonist in Nothing But the Bones, who we see again in this next book, is a prosperity gospel slinging megachurch
So we
preacher.
get more of the Price family.
Based on the prosperity gospel guys. You know who I'm talking about. I don't need to list off the names. Just a few of them from here. But yeah, well, Jim Bakker took advantage of my mom when I was a tyke, and so that kind of stuck around and caused a big problem for my family, and so now I look at it differently, I think, and so yeah, I have brought that into the book, and so I question religion in my novels, and I hope that my characters can kind of convey what they think, because they start telling me different things, different points of view, so.
We sort of had the regional focus. So Tom's book is set in Boston, but so what I wanted to ask you is to what degree is the setting sort of a character in your book? I mean, you have the Savannah and also the kind of the Gullah Geechee background, and then McFalls County. Like, how do you make that sort of that setting sort of a character on its own, or sort of a unique thing?
I think you have to have a deep love for the place before you even start. Thomas's books are beautiful that way because the place is so palpable. This place, I'm talking about your last trilogy, but if you have a deep sense of love for whatever it is, for that place that you're talking about, then that character of the place becomes legitimate, I think. My county is fictional, but it's North Georgia. It's Clayton, Georgia. It's Blue Ridge. It's all that area. I just didn't want anybody to come at me with a topical map and say that's not how it works. So I changed it and melted them all together. But it's my favorite place on earth. So it was easy for me to talk about that place. And I didn't really even have a plot so much as I just wanted to write about that place. It would have been a travel book if I wasn't, mentally off balance.
Yeah, so for me, it's interesting. I love the South, and for some reasons I hate the South. I know I shouldn't say that out loud. I was actually born in Ohio, and I moved down here. My husband is a native of Georgia, and, he has kind of brought me over to the dark side about the positive aspects of the South. But in all seriousness, I feel like this part of the country, in particular in Georgia, the place is a bit of an enigma to me. And so I like to delve into that. The South has, a chaotic past, a chaotic history. Atlanta in particular, at one time was, the hubbub of the Civil War, and then at the same time, it's the cradle of the civil rights. And so there's a certain dichotomy in the city that lends itself to very interesting stories. For my latest book, What You Leave Behind, I wanted to explore a particular community, the Gullah Geechee community, which is steeped in the Low Country. And if you've ever been down to like the Golden Isles and Brunswick and Savannah and that area, It's beautiful, beautiful area, but it too is kind of steeped in this kind of chaotic history. And for me, I think that that is in and of itself a character, right? And so I try to make sure that the story is imbued with all those aspects that make that particular geographical area of the country so unique, so that you not only feel like you're in a place, you feel that place. For me, whenever I go to Jekyll Island, St. Simons, Brunswick, the first time, true story, the first time I stepped on Jekyll Island, I felt kind of this heaviness. And I couldn't explain it, but I almost wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. And I came to understand over the years as I kept going back that that land, that particular area of the country was part and parcel of me. And so I try to make sure that I'm writing to those feelings, because if I feel that, I want you, the reader, to feel that as well. I think all of those unique feelings should kind of bubble up in the story, if you will.
Yeah, I think, place is important. We're all to some degrees a product of where we're from, where we were raised, and where we live now. And sometimes you know it more than others. Sometimes it takes traveling for you to realize that the things that you thought were normal aren't, or if you've ever relocated, definitely you notice that. And I've relocated a few times, and you start to realize, oh, this thing that I thought was normal is actually this weird New England thing, and not everybody else does that. People don't say that. People don't talk that way, or people don't feel that way. And as, a transplant living here, I'll see things that people might think of as normal. I'll be like, that's a weird Atlanta thing. Nobody else does that. That's kind of strange. So, I think it's, there are downsides having moved as much as I have, but one of the nice things is that I feel like I bring a different perspective to Atlanta. And when I wrote my Atlanta series, part of the reason I did that is that I wanted to write about where I live now, because it's been 16 years now. I've raised 2 boys here. This is home now. It's not where I was from. It's not where I was raised. And I didn't benefit from this uncle's stories and this grandma's stories on the front porch. I don't have that cultural heritage, but I've talked to people, did a lot of research, and just again, I've lived here for 16 years, so I wanted to write an Atlanta series, or Atlanta book at least. And I think that I don't want to write a book that could be set anywhere. I feel like the best books really feel like they are of a place, the characters are from that area. When I read Brian's books, I am in North Georgia. I've only been in North Georgia a little bit, but when I read his books, I feel like I'm transported to a different place. And Wanda's book, the new book on the Georgia coast, where I've visited a few times, when I read the book, I learn a lot about it that I didn't know. And the rhythms, the way people talk, the interactions feels just a little different than what I'm used to. And even your first book, which is set in Atlanta, but it's in the corporate lawyer Atlanta world. And I've seen the towers, but I'm not a corporate lawyer. So I feel like even though it was set where I live, it felt different. And I like that. A book should feel unique, and it should really draw from where it is set.
So what parts of crime fiction are difficult to get?
It's all difficult.
In terms of what, in the sense that
Writing it.
But you might spend a lot of time and effort on something, like doing research or revising or what trying to get something right, and then you get kind of hit out of left field or something, but by what readers say to you or what other people say to you. There may be kind of a mismatch there, but what do you put a lot of effort into?
It all comes so easily to me. It's ridiculous. I don't feel like I'm qualified for this question.
Well,
See, you left 3 writers sitting up here speechless, because we could all sit here and go, everything. I mean, my poor husband and son, they hear me constantly saying, oh, this is so horrible. I can't do this.
I was thinking more about sort of reader response, what that you found out that this is not your first, for all of you, this is not your first, and you've had the experience of going through the process of writing a book, and then having reader response to it, and then maybe adjust your approach the next time around.
Well, I'm going to go to your first question first, which is the hardest thing. Writing a really good plot is really hard. And there are some critics out there that think that's easy and that even kind of look down their nose at people that have good plots, and they only want lovely writing and great characters. And look, I want lovely writing and great characters too, but whoever told critics that writing a complicated plot is easy is crazy. That's the hardest thing by far. Especially with like a mystery or a thriller, like you want there to be surprises. You want there to be plot twists. If there aren't, the book kind of stinks. It's not a very good crime story if it doesn't surprise you at some point. But if it's like too surprising or too twisty, you're like, come on, that's crazy. That's no. So it's like, it's got to be like just right. It's got to have just enough twists that you're like, oh, I did not see that coming. Wow, that was wild. But not so crazy that you're like, that would never happen, man. So that I think is the hardest thing, is just getting that right. And then like, once you figure it out, all the edits you have to make later, like, oh, well, I said in that chapter that he was in the other town that day, and I've got all these little things you need to change. Like, that's the work part of what we do, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Tom said it exactly right, that a lot of times people snub their noses at mysteries and thrillers, like, oh, that's just genre fiction, and, it doesn't have, 27-word sentences and things like that. But no doubt, when you pick up one of our books, you're going to get to a part of the book where your heart starts to race, right? And you're like, what the heck is going to happen next? I'm like, oh, crap, don't go in there, girl. Right, that is a craft. You have to learn how to create that, right? And that's not easy. That's tough. Or you'll get to a part, hopefully, in one of my books, where you sit there and you want to cry your eyes out. And you're like, oh, crap, why did she kill that person? There is a craft to making you feel that way, and that's hard to do. But, you talk about like having to go back into a book. I remember with my very first book, when I got my agent signed me on, and we had our first call, and she's like, Wanda, I love, love, love this book. It was all her little secrets. She says, I love this book, but I think you need to change the back half of the book. I was like, what?
That was like one half of a praise sandwich.
Exactly. But she was right, and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
The hardest part for me is meeting my deadlines. Because I always know how my book is going to end. All right, I'm going to demystify mysteries for you guys, and I don't know if you work like this at all, but when I sit down to write a book, I know exactly how it's going to end, and then I push toward that ending. That way it keeps me on track. I don't have to outline anything. I know exactly where my ending is, and it's almost like that's going to be my gotcha. That's my moment, and so I work toward that. But my problem is, I just start letting these characters do whatever they want to do, and then they start dictating to me how the story goes, and then it becomes a problem, because no, that's not what I had in mind, and I'm talking back, and my kids are like, "Are you going to cook?" And then I lose it, and then I have to just set it down and get away from it, and then by the time I've done that 8 or 9 times, I've lost the plot. And then I have to sit back down and redo it.
That's so interesting, because I am the complete opposite of Brian. I start a book and I never know how the ending is going to come about. Like, I know generally who like the bad guys are and kind of where I want my protagonist to go as a character arc, but I don't really know until I'm halfway into the book. And that creates all sorts of problems for me.
I was going to say, if it's working out better for you, then maybe I should do it that way too.
Because then I'm kind of like, oh God, I got to figure out how this is going to go. And then my husband and my son are like, are you going to cook? So, I think we all get to the same place eventually, but
it's mental illness.
There you go. It is.
Writing is mental illness, y'all.
Of a book.
I heard somebody say that like mysteries should be written backwards. You start with the ending, but that's never really made any sense to me either. I'm not like you. I can't imagine not knowing the ending at all. But I don't have a tight roadmap either. It's like I think it's gonna end like this, but
I think when I have that idea of, oh man, then I can go back and work toward that, and I can drop those clues all the way. And I'm spoon feeding you this story. But it's almost like the Sixth Sense. You know, I think he had the idea of, what if the guy was dead? And I just ruined the Sixth Sense. Who's moaning out there? It's only 25 years old. Okay? So my point is, like, he has this idea, okay, what if the guy's dead? And then he writes backwards. And if you watch it again for the second time, knowing that reveal at the end, you're like, wow, the whole time I should have been seeing that.
So do you start with character first or with plot first?
Every one of them's been different, honestly. This latest one is all character driven. I didn't even care if I had a plot. It was a romance, and I wanted to write a romance, and so that's what I did. And then the plot was secondary, but my first two was completely flip-flopped. I had a plot.
The romance panel is down the street.
They won't take me over there, Thomas. That's why I have to describe my books as thrillers.
Okay.
Aren't romances thrilling?
So another part of Brian's book that made me laugh was there's a line where it says, "These two idiots had robbed one of the most dangerous men in North Georgia." And I laughed out loud. My daughter can tell you. But then I started to think about how these guys are sort of stereotypical hillbillies. You know, they own an auto repair shop, or something.
Is it though, or is it just a trailer in the woods?
Yeah. And so that leads. How do you make these guys sort of more than just stereotypes? And then I think you have that challenge for each of yours. Like sometimes you have, I don't know, just the lady down the street, the old grandma down the street, or the obnoxious police officer, or So
One
how
of
do
the
you
best
make them?
pieces of advice I ever got was by John Connolly, who I worship and adore, and I have read his books, and I wanted to be like that guy. And I got to meet him, and I said, "Impart some wisdom on me, impart some wisdom." And he said, "You never have side characters. Every character needs to be interesting enough to write their own book around. No side characters. Don't phone it in." And so I make a specific point to try to make sure that my side characters are memorable. And the way I do that is I steal a lot visually. Like I will go to a store and I will study that guy for a long time, and now he's the guy that's in the store in my book. Or those two guys, if I see that trailer in the woods, I'm gonna stop, see how that works out for him, see him loading a big TV off the back of the truck. Now that's a scene in my book. You know, the way people talk to each other, it's an observational thing.
Brian, I think we finally found something we agree on. I couldn't agree more that every character in the book should be interesting enough that you want to know more of that character's backstory, right? And so characters in my book, the latest book, like, Uncle Duke and Mrs. Trainer, who is the lady down the street, and, LaShonda from across the street, they all have had something interesting happen in their life, enough that when you read about LaShonda, who hobbles across the street wearing a boot, and ask, the protagonist, "Hey, so I heard that you practice law or something. Maybe you could, work for me for free." It's like, wait, what? So you want to know more about her. Why is she wearing that boot? Why does she have 4 kids by 3 different fathers? What's going on in her life? What about Mrs. Trainer, who lost her husband? And, now she still cooks his favorite meal on Saturday mornings when she wakes up. What's going on with that? I agree with Brian. I think every character, your side characters, need to be as interesting as your protagonist.
Yeah, I think you just need to be curious about people. Like, what are people like? Like, there's people we don't know that well. They're sort of side characters in our life. But I think when you're a writer, you really got to sit down and be like, all right, what makes this person tick? Like, what what are their hopes? What are their dreams? What are the obstacles in their life? What are the things that make them different or interesting? And especially if they're a minor character, we don't always have time to get into all that. Like we don't have like 3 or 4 paragraphs. You don't have to have 3 or 4 paragraphs about every character you meet in the book. Otherwise, it's going to be so boring to read. It's going to take forever. But I think, it's a writer's job to, like, as succinctly as possible, just like a little bit of detail here, just a choice sentence there, and you're like, oh yeah, I know this person. I've seen somebody like that. That totally rings true. And I heard some really cool advice. It was actually for screenwriters, but I think it applies for books too. A screenplay is basically just dialogue. Like, there's a little bit of stage direction, but it's mostly dialogue, right? And this person said, in a great script, there should never be a line of dialogue that any character could have said. Like, really good writing, really good dialogue, if there's a line of dialogue that only could have been said by Brian, or that line only could have been said by Wanda or Tom. If it's like a generic line that anybody could have said, the line stinks and you gotta rewrite it. Because we all sound a little different, and every character should have like their own rhythm. This person uses a lot of slang, this person swears a lot, this person talks in full paragraphs, whatever it is. You want every character to feel really unique so that when the reader hears them, you don't need to always have he said, she said, whatever. You're like, oh, I know who said that, I know who said that.
And one of the ways you do that too, I know for me, is listening to people. I tend to be kind of nosy, and so when I'm sitting in a restaurant or standing in line at a store, I'm usually eavesdropping on a conversation. I remember one time I was in a
All the time. All the time.
All the time. But I remember once I was in a restaurant and there were 2 guys in the booth behind me, and one guy, they were like young, 20-somethings, and one guy said, yeah, so what are you going to tell your mom when she finds out that your graduation is on Saturday and you didn't tell her? I was like, what? I haven't written it yet, but I got to write that in a book someday, because I'm just like, so this guy's graduating, his mother doesn't know. There's a story behind that, right? And so I'm always listening to people and how they talk and what they say and what they don't say as well.
Airports are really good for that.
Yes, airports are really good for that.
Whenever you talk to us, we're just thinking, all right, I got it. Okay, we're taking notes all the time. It's kind of a disease, but we just can't get over it.
How do current events show up in your books? For Tom, I think you can draw a connection between World War II and today, perhaps, and then same goes for you all.
Sure. So most of my books are historical. I've written a couple that were set kind of today, but we're all we're alive now, so we are not unaffected by the things going on in the world today. And some people, it comes out in their work more than others. And so when I had an idea for a World War II set book. I'd always wanted to write a book set during World War II, and I also always wanted to set a book in Boston because that's where I grew up. But then the more as I did my research and learned certain things, I couldn't help but hear echoes to our own time. Like, there was a lot of misinformation at that time because we had just gone to war, and there were spies trying to spread stories to spread defeatism and make people not want to fight the war. And there were a lot of rumors about different, ethnic groups. This group isn't really participating in the war. That group's really against us. And, there were new mediums going on, or well, maybe not new mediums, but like the way rumors were spreading was different than in the past. And the Nazis had a very strong disinformation network that they'd used throughout Europe to sort of spread this myth that the Nazis were unbeatable. And a lot of what I read, I was like, gosh, that kind of makes me think about stuff that's going on today. And not that you can draw like a total parallel, but I just thought it made it a little bit more interesting to me. And I thought it would make that time period a little bit more interesting to today's reader, knowing about some of the things that were going on today. So I think it's inevitable that things that we're thinking about in our own lives, in our own politics and in the country today are going to filter into the work that we do. But maybe even more so with you two guys writing about the present.
Yeah, so for me and what you leave behind, the genesis for that story actually came out of a news report. I was just at home watching the news, and the guy is interviewing a woman in South Carolina, and I think it was a hurricane, speaking of hurricanes, had just come through and decimated her property. And she couldn't get access to FEMA funds. And the reason why she couldn't is because she couldn't prove that she owned the property. Despite the fact that she had been born in that house and her mother had owned the house and then her mother before her had owned the house. But the house had always gone to family members without a will. And it is a legal concept called heirs property. And if you die without some legal disposition for what happens to your property after you die, then all your relatives inherit a fractional share. And all it takes is one member of the family to sell their fractional share, and they can force a court-ordered sale. And so property that's been in your family, that you've lived in, you pay taxes on for generations, can be sold right out from under you. And so as I listened to this woman's story, I thought, how does this happen? Now, I'm a lawyer, and I didn't even realize the extent that heirs property could decimate a community. And as I started to dig more and more into it, I thought, if I know so little about this, what about other people who aren't even trained as lawyers? And that was kind of the genesis for the story. And so I am always attentive, to what's going on in the news and what's going on around me. Now, trying to tell my publisher, hey, I want to write a thriller about real estate law. Like, that's different. But it all worked out. And I think that is kind of why we come to writing, right? Because we're trying to tell a story, whether it's something that we're trying to work out cathartically from within ourselves, or it's some knowledge that we can impart. I hope that, when you read this book, you learn about heirs property, you now learn that, hey, I need to get my affairs in order.
Real estate law.
No, in a thriller.
I'm going to take a broader stroke at this question because I guess like events that are happening around me are usually the last thing I pay attention to. But I do have an affliction called Bruce Wayne syndrome, which means that when I see injustice, I want to stomp it out with a stick. And that has really never served me well. But so when I became a published author and my books were going to be, sold around the world, I said I have a platform now. And I don't know how long I'll be doing it, and I don't know if I'll get a chance to write more than one. Every time I write another one, I'm blessed to have another opportunity to do it. And I feel like there should be something in there of value outside of just a bunch of rednecks from Georgia killing each other. And so on the outside, it kind of looks that way. It looks like this big criminal drama that's playing out. But if you look a little bit deeper, each book, the first one is the dangers of toxic masculinity. The second one is the myth of the barefoot and pregnant Southern woman. The third one is grief and loss and divorce epidemic. And then this one is gender identity, and it's right there and it's in your face, but you don't know it. And I feel like that's what happens is like when you start to get preachy about those things and like push your agenda on people, it becomes like late-phase Don Winslow, and I don't want to do that, So if somebody can read it and think, man, that was a hoot, or that was a great thriller, but at the same time maybe think about their position on something, then yeah, that's kind of my job. I feel like I have to do that. If I don't do it, then I'm not doing right by y'all.
And I do think one of the cool things about mysteries and crime fiction is there's a lot going on, and it's exciting, and you can kind of get away with maybe having some of that stuff in there without feeling preachy. Also, Chinatown is real estate law.
That's right.
Wow.
There's a lot of crime.
I wish I had remembered that when I was talking to my editor.
I can't believe you just said she ripped off Chinatown, Tom.
No.
Hardly. This book is very far from Chinatown.
But there's a lot of criminality in real estate, so it comes up. No offense to any of the realtors or mortgage lenders.
If there are any realtors in the audience,
you're all awesome.
Apologies, please.
We can ask each other questions. We got 2 minutes left. Oh, now I have to actually have a question. I don't really have a question. You're out? Oh, he's out. We didn't talk long enough.
Man, we weren't long-winded enough, man. That never happens.
Shall I sing?
Well, what's something, because we've done this a few times now, like what was something that was particularly hard about the newest one? That you were like, this was not as hard as I thought. Did that happen?
Oh,
for you?
that's
that
a
was-
good
that was what
one
I was gonna
about
ask
your
is-
newest
is
book.
in
What
terms
was
of-
the hardest thing
Oh.
about? I got something for
I got
that.
something for that too. I just
Yeah.
wanted to point out though, we were told that we would have our knuckles wrapped if we picked somebody for a question. So when I saw your hand go up, I wasn't ignoring you. We're not allowed to take questions, or we're gonna get smacked around, right?
So for my book, the hardest thing was writing about grief. I used to always say I would never tackle grief because, you know, people pick up your book and they don't know exactly what they're getting, right? They read the back, you know, maybe they read a couple paragraphs in the book, but, you know, you get knee deep into a book and then somebody's just lost a parent and you're writing about losing a parent. I think, oh, that's kind of tough. So when I set out to write my third book, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to tackle that, but I did. And the hardest part for me was writing about it because I wound up tapping into feelings of loss when I lost my own mother. My character in the book has lost her mother, and she is grieving. And I remember, you know, whenever I had to write some scenes like that, thinking, why am I doing this? And you know, I'd start welling up, and, you know, there's a scene in the book I'll never read out loud at a reading just because every time I read it, it makes me cry. And, you know, again, I think it's like Brian said, I think it's a touch of mental illness or something, because I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? But I felt like the character really needed to be authentic. And she comes into the story where she is in a place where she is most broken in her life. And to me, it seems like losing a loved one is something that can really break you. And so I don't regret having tackled that, but man, that was really, really tough for me to write in this book.
I did exactly the same thing in 2020 with that novel. I had to go through that, and writing is very cathartic. But this recent book, it took me 4 years to write this one, and it was because the apocalypse happened, and then I'm gonna get raw. Then I got a divorce, and all these terrible things were just beating me up. And everywhere you look, nobody's getting along, and you've got these. One side hates the other, like politics have now turned into arena sports, you know, and nobody's winning from anything, and it's just this ugliness all around all the time. I said, okay, I have to create something positive and write it into existence. So I wanted to write a love story. I mean, I made the romance thing joke a few minutes ago, but it truly is a romance novel for me because I wanted to write a love story because there weren't any around for me to look at, so I had to create my own. And trying to find hope inside such a dark, ugly place, because you rarely see that in my genre. You know, rural crime fiction rarely has a hopeful ending. I mean, it's always the Cormac McCarthy, everybody is dead and everything is terrible and tomorrow will be worse. And there's plenty of that out there, but I wanted this one to ring a little different and hit a little different. I wanted people to be able to set this book down and say, you know what? Even for the worst of us, there's something to look forward to. But I had to create that out of nothing, and that was hard. Yeah.
One of the hard things for me, we're going to turn this into the romance panel after all, because for my new book, I wanted it to be more fun, and there is a strong romance angle in it, because you've got this guy, he's a Catholic FBI agent who's got this problem where he sleeps around a lot because all the other eligible bachelors are off at war. And so there's all these lonely women, and, you know, what's a guy gonna do? And so, you know, he gets into trouble for that. And then there's this woman who is a newspaper reporter, and she's investigating a story that ends up dovetailing with a murder mystery he's involved in. And they're polar opposites in a lot of ways, and so there's a kind of will they or won't they thread throughout the book. So I won't give anything away, but it's a big part of the book. And I did that partly because, like I mentioned earlier, when you write crime stories, you got to bring out the worst in everybody. You've got to make the reader think it could be this person, it could be this person, it could be this person. So you're getting into a lot of dark stuff, and you're sort of having this really dark view of people, but that's not how I am as a person. Like, I don't meet somebody and think, I wonder who you killed. Like, that's just not how it is. I don't think it was, I wonder which crimes you've committed. And so I wanted the book to feel a little bit happier or just a little bit lighter. Like, it's still a murder mystery. There's still a lot of dark stuff in it, but I didn't want it to weigh people down. Like, I just written 3 books set in the Jim Crow South, and I'm really proud of those books, and I think, I accomplished what I wanted to with them, and I might even write more, but there's some heavy stuff in there. And so I wanted to write a book that didn't quite feel that heavy. And so I think I succeeded, but it was tough trying to get away from that darkness.
Do you think that there's maybe like a trend across the board for all of us to want to do that, to make it just a little bit lighter because we've had such an incredibly heavy 4 years?
I always try and put a little humor in each of my books because my protagonists literally go through hell after I throw the kitchen sink at them. And so I try to add, some character who, not that they're jokey, but for example, my latest book, Uncle Duke, is he brings that levity, right? He's like 70-something years old. He carries a pistol, and he threatens to pistol whip anybody who hurts his family. You're like, okay, maybe you could pull that off. No disrespect, but, you might be a little past your prime for going around beating up 20-somethings. But he does. He winds up doing that in the book. And so I think that is kind of the levity that he brings. He runs a barbershop. They sit there, they talk noise and nonsense. Because meanwhile, his niece is going through this really dark time. And so I feel a little guilty when I put all this really bad stuff in the book, and I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be like a Debbie Downer kind of thing. So maybe I need to add a little humor or something light, just so that the reader isn't kind of dragged and pulled to the end, if that makes any sense.
I'm getting a message that we're coming to the end of our time, so let's make a transition outside, and then you can meet some of these past and future readers.
All right, thanks so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.